Behind every breakthrough in education is a conversation that sparked it. Thank you for joining us and welcome to the Education Insider, the podcast that gives you inside access to the brightest thinkers, innovators, and changemakers in education today. Hosted by Jacob Hanson and powered by PRP Group, a Hawk media company. We're cutting through the noise to bring you straightforward, insightful discussions that move education forward. No fluff, no jargon, just real, actionable insights from the people making a difference today and those shaping the future of education. Buckle up, because the Education Insider starts now.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Education Insider. Excited to have you here. Appreciate you joining us. As always, we have a really exciting and engaging conversation we're going to have. I have the distinct pleasure of having Michael Campbell, a good friend of mine, someone that has been around the industry for a long time and has a very unique perspective on some of the things we're going to talk about today. And so before I hand the mic to him for an intro, wanted to just give you guys a heads up that we're going to be diving into some of the things that have really come into the limelight since the new administration took office and dig into what does it mean to really have a localized strategy? What does it mean to be able to shift based on the landscape where, sooner rather than later, we could have 50 plus distinct markets with distinct markets within them. And so, Michael, super glad to have you here. I'm glad that everybody joined us. Hand the mic to you. And why don't you, once you give an intro, kick us off with your thoughts on the topic.
Thanks, Jacob. And thanks for having me today. I'm excited about the opportunity to talk a little bit about the market and what's happening in the market. But I'll tell you a little bit about, for those people who haven't met me, like Jacob said, I'm the president of Advancing Global EDU. We've been around for the last 7 years or so, helping companies, institutions in both higher education and K-12 with their go-to-market strategies and strategic advising services. So we touch, people on both sides of the fence, and the business side of the industry and on the actual institution side at the district level and at the institution level on the higher education side. So, I, like you, go ahead.
I was going to say, like I already told the folks, you bring a unique perspective, and I think that between the two of us, this will be a really fun one. So I'll give you the mic back. I'm interested to hear more.
Yeah. So like you, I think that the last 3 months have changed our business tremendously, both on the business side and on the policy side for schools and for higher education. We've seen the federal restructuring happening. We've seen executive orders around school choice, about parent choice, and we're seeing more and more of the decentralization happening in our industry. And I think, as a result, states are going to have to look at how they fund school districts and their college and university programs. And that's going to have a huge impact on our business as a whole. The whole decentralization piece, and as you said earlier, will drive the localization of our business even further. So we've always had local control for schools, but there has always been that state and federal piece that has provided a tremendous amount of input and a tremendous amount of influence because of the money involved. And so I think as we look at this going forward, we're going to have to really look at more decentralization, more localization, because you're going to have to target your markets, by West Coast, South, and even down to the state or district because of how schools and districts are actually funding and actually putting together policy for their individual districts or their learning LEAs.
Oh, absolutely. And um, the hope is some existing funding mechanisms will make this, I'm doing air quotes here for those of you that are just listening, seamless. The hope, I agree with you that control's always been, at the local level. While there are strong recommendations or even decisions made of, here are the approved curriculums for the state or those kinds of things, I do believe it's going to be a little bit of wild, wild west before everything settles down. Um, the work that we've done, with a lot of our clients, many of them come to us because they're not able to work at a national level. While we help a lot of folks more nationally, a lot of them come to us because they have a specific region, state, or even regions within states based on local or state policy or legislation or specific funding. And so we've been doing a lot of this work, really going, you mentioned even by the district, of pinpointing specific municipalities within states that make sense. We reach enough, there's enough critical mass, those kinds of things to really, almost run like an account-based marketing strategy within that community, not just at a single school district, but across the community. And so it's, I know we'll get to this, but I'm sure everyone's asking, well, how the heck is that scalable? So just rest assured, we will get there. But I do see this as an opportunity. I grew up in Minnesota, school choice state. And so I believe there's always been healthy competition. Haven't done enough research to really say that we've done it right, or we're perfect or anything along those lines. Growing up, I just saw the competition. It was about sports, it was about academics, and it was regular that kids ship their kids across the cities to go to a different district for one reason or another. That's not the case across the board. So would love to hear from you, Michael, as far as how you're coaching your clients on seeing this or taking advantage of this as an opportunity versus, holy crap, the sky is falling.
Yeah, it is definitely not the skies falling. I think we have some really good opportunities, and I agree with you about the localization. And what we're telling our clients is to focus. And focus is kind of like the key word there because, what's happening, like as you talked about there, what's happening in Minnesota may not be happening in Illinois or in Texas. And so you really have to do your due diligence there. But, you have states that are really investing in education, like Illinois, like Minnesota, like, you may not like what's happening in Texas with education, but, the reality is they spend such a tremendous amount on education within the state. It's still worth your time if your product can meet the needs of those schools and school districts that are there. Um, you just have to focus on what is happening for that individual geographic area, that individual, group of educators. So we know that, recently they came out with the national test scores for reading and math, and there were a lot of states that did not, rise to the top of those. So if you have a solution that helps those districts or those states where they're had some challenges in reading and math, that would be a great way to focus your attention.
To me, that's a great place to, rather than throwing darts at the map, it's a great place to start, especially for folks who haven't been around the block many times and maybe are still trying to figure out, what this strategy, might look like. Um, for those that may have already had to, be forced into this, based on circumstance, again, legislation or, whatever the case may be. Like we have a couple of clients right now that have come to us that we work with in 6 states, 13 states, things along those lines. And there's priorities within those. The first thing we really started with and looked at is, does their current brand, and their current core messaging, is that agile enough? Is it strong enough right now to be agile enough to stretch across so many different markets? Or is that something we need to take a step back? Because you're right about going after where states are struggling, where the money is, where school choice, may be something that actually benefits your company, looking at all of those things and then taking a step back and saying, can I go into, we've identified Arizona, can I go into Phoenix with this message where school choice, they were one of the first kind of pioneers to the market, as far as school choice goes? Or, do I take it or is this going to still work in, a state where this is brand new or not even happening, like a Massachusetts or, something along those lines. So that's a lot of the work that we do up front. And while it's not, and I'm telling everyone you should do this, you don't have to build core messaging for every market segment. You don't have to redo everything. Just take a step back and analyze where are you going and who do you need to be there, and does your current online persona of your company represent the new lens your customers may be looking at you through. And if not, it's worthwhile to take a pause. Most folks can get solid messaging branding work done in month and a half. And so I think even before going into those areas is making sure, can we message? You can have the best product in the world, but if you're not truly resonating at that local level, that product's going to go unnoticed. And I feel like, and maybe I'll toss this to you because I know we're moving through our agenda here as far as our talking points go, Michael, that we wanted to make sure we got to. What are your thoughts on this? I mean, how do you see the scalability or the adaptability of a local approach?
Well, I think you're already seeing some companies do that. And they're focused on tailoring their messaging right, as you said, to their local needs. So you don't have to do this for everyone, but you can modify your messaging to meet the needs of your local customers that are out there. I think that, using folks to help with your PR and marketing um, uh, messaging out there, because now more than ever, because there's so many companies in ed tech, it's just getting through the noise, cutting through the noise. And so I think having that PR and media relations and marketing messaging out there is more important than ever. And you really do have to speak to those local needs. So if you see that, they are a high Title I area, that they are an area that didn't score well on the reading and math tests. Those are ways that you can easily reach out to those schools and districts, because you know that that's really going to be a priority for them to raise scores in reading and math, or to help those students who are on the free and reduced lunch plan because of funding issues these days. The state and feds are cutting a lot of those free and reduced lunch plans. And, you may have the opportunity to help a school or school district with some of those things. So, making sure that you have state specific messaging or even regional specific messaging, because we know that what's happening in the Chicago area is, CPS, Chicago Public Schools, is such a humongous area that it affects the collar counties of Chicago, and it even affects areas into Indiana because of the uh, the policies and the funding that goes into those.
Well, and that's there's just so much to think about everything you just threw out there. And, ultimately, I think wrapping up or like putting a bow on some of the things you just said there, Michael, and what I had mentioned is do your research before you go to market and then do something about that research.
Hmm.
Lots of folks
And
just
we
slap.
always talk about plan your work and work your plan.
There you go.
And that's a great way to do that, because then you can pull all that information into your plan, and having that plan, having the opportunity to work with partners to get this done is a huge way to scale your plan.
Absolutely. Well, one of the things we had touched on when we were, talking about doing this episode together, Michael, was really what differences what are we seeing based on more school board influence, parent advocacy, or parental involvement, more of the community involvement, as well as kind of the rise of the of superintendent autonomy. So I know that you lean more into sales and you're more directly in contact with folks. I'd love to hear just from your perspective, how should our listeners think about some of these areas differently than maybe they would have this time last year?
So, obviously, I think impact is hugely important, and people want to hear the impact of your solution. So, if you have case studies, if you have white papers, if you're working with a university to do some of those impact studies, uh, decision makers are interested in those because as as they as the budget gets tighter, then having that impactful solution, one that will be used and not just sit on the shelf, it becomes even more important. The second piece of that is those relationships still matter. Um, you know,
I was going to ask you that question after this. I love that you brought that up.
Yeah, I mean, I look at it as trying to surround your decision maker with that impact study, as well as that relationship that people, want to buy from people that they know, from people that they like, and obviously you've got to have a solution that meets their needs, but ultimately it really matters that your mission and that who you're working with aligns with that school or that school district's mission as well. And then, I think the other piece of this is the referrals. Um, we know that if a school in Naperville, Illinois, which is in one of the collar counties here in Illinois, is using a solution, then maybe a close district by them would also be interested in using because they have similar demographics and they have similar budgeting. And, as a result, they are able to see the correlation of how it's worked for one district, it can work for ours.
And that's you gave a nice segue as far as, if you're thinking folks about including awareness, additional proactive PR, those kinds of things. A lot of these partners, they want that kind of attention. They want to be seen as that thought leader. And now more than ever, they're competing against districts across the city or wherever their media is reaching, or sometimes even beyond, with virtual and all of that kind of stuff. And so leveraging that local media, trusted local, education bloggers, local NPR, regional NPR station, that kind of stuff. It allows them to get that success story out and allows them to build their brand. And I think what you're talking about as far as wrapping everything around that customer, you really leverage that customer to build your own brand within that community. There will be plenty of, hey, we need to do that. We can't let them outperform or outdo or outshow us. Or hey, Dr. So and so is a great superintendent. I haven't talked to them in a while. I should reach out and ask how they're actually doing this. Those are the kinds of things that we'd be looking for, but that just getting that name out there through the customer is the best way to go.
I agree. And I think one of the other things is that as you get to know some of these key decision makers, superintendents, directors of curriculum, directors of technology, uh, you can rely on them to give you feedback as well. Because I think that one of the other pieces that is clearly, you and I have been in this business for a long time, and we can give you anecdotally what we think about a certain school district or a certain area, but what really counts is the data that we can show. So if you know that the schools or school districts in a certain state have funding for a certain thing, or it's a strategic priority for those districts, it makes your sales and marketing message so much easier to craft based on the data, not just anecdotal of, oh, I heard, that this is happening in this state, or that is a new priority for the legislature for, Indiana. And so having those data points really helps you as well.
Uh, Here, here. And for those companies or those folks listening right now that are saying, yeah, we just can't afford to do all of those things. We can't afford it. Just rest assured, reach out to me or to Michael. There are plenty of wonderful organizations and really smart people that do this work that make it accessible to anyone, that can provide a lot of this deep research and really provide you with go-to-market strategies for specific regions, states, those kinds of things. And I think, really um, encapsulates the whole idea of, if you're thinking localization, it doesn't mean that you stop thinking nationally. Instead of being able to take a national approach, and then lower that down into the local spots, it's really taking the localization area and building that up into a national brand. And so, really keeping in mind that building national growth through local wins. I think you made a good point when we spoke about this episode, earlier. But I did want to shift because we're running out of time here, or running low on time. I did want to shift to, what does this mean long term? We're talking short term right now, things that folks should do. It's not really knee jerk, oh my gosh, we got to do this. The climate is right to be, reconsidering your approach to sales, marketing, branding, messaging, all of those things. Um, what's one of the areas that you feel companies should really look at to help, protect long-term success in a more decentralized world?
Well, if they don't think locally, you're building a national market impact by doing locally. So, starting in Minnesota, starting in Illinois, starting in Wisconsin, Michigan, or Texas, or whatever the case may be, is you are building the opportunity to grow your solution nationally. And so, if you don't start thinking that way now, then how are you ever going to actually expand into the national um, market by working, Arizona, Texas first, and then let's expand, further into the West Coast. We know Utah, or Oregon or Washington State, those kinds of places are great places to expand after you've built that base of customers where you can also use as referrals um, to grow that to grow your market, to scale that market. So for you, so it's it is not just a very short term kind of approach or strategy. You really want to think of this as just a stepping stone to your larger goals that your company might have.
And appreciate all those insights, Michael. One of the things I'd love to hear from you is to share a little bit more about why you feel it's so important companies are, hyper responsive and maybe more agile now than they've needed to be in the past.
Well, obviously with AI in the mix, those kinds of things, the technology, the innovation that's happening, you're going to see a lot of different kinds of schools pop up, I think, too, because of the Department of Ed's focus on local. You're seeing school choice, you're seeing that you're going to see a lot of different online schools. You may see, I think you mentioned this earlier, about sports related schools. So you might, and there's some of those happening already. But if you look at some of those key areas, you're going to start seeing a lot of different kinds of schools pop up. And so it's a great time to innovate, to think about your marketing message, to think about your sales messaging and how you create your sales team. So you may have an inside sales team, but then you may have a specialized sales team that focuses strictly on sports schools or online schools that are offering specialty subject areas. So really right now is a good time to think about innovation and to think outside the box.
I love it, and I think that's a great way to kind of wrap up the conversation so that we're not stringing this along too long for our listeners. One of the things that uh, I was thinking about as you were talking is just one more kind of quick message on AI since you brought it up. Folks, there are so many ways to leverage AI in all of the stuff that we just talked through. Don't create one wheel and then recreate more wheels everywhere you're going. Really leverage some of those tools, whether you like Claude or ChatGPT, or there's tons of other ones out there that can be a really great thought partner. And so just, really think about that. The last thing I would say too that would really maybe put some oomph behind those last comments, Michael, is I've seen more influx of folks in my world needing and really wanting branding and messaging work, both visual and messaging, more than I've ever seen in any stretch. This is, and we've been around for, 13, 14 years. And so the last, I'd say 6-8 weeks, this is usually something folks come to me for PR and then ask about branding, but they're coming right for, and this may even be the only thing they need. So kudos to those folks. I think there's a movement starting here. But yeah, any final thoughts you wanted to leave with our guests here, Michael?
No, I think, as you said, now is a good time to start thinking about things like back to school. I know it's only April or May now, it's May now, but we're already starting to think about those strategies for back to school and, starting to work that piece of the business that's so important for back to school in the fall and putting together your plan. We talked about, plan your work your plan. And I think we can clearly see that there's a lot of opportunity still in the market. And, it makes it a great time to work in this business because of the innovation like AI, things like that, as well as seeing how education will morph into adapting to the local realization of how things are going to be for the next little while.
Well, I appreciate it, Michael. Appreciate your time. Thanks to all of you for joining us today. We will have Michael's contact information, LinkedIn, website, all that good stuff in the show notes for the folks that want to hunt him down. Otherwise, you can find him at his website, advancingglobaledu.com.
It is.
There we go.
Thanks.
Absolutely. Thanks again, everybody, and we'll see you on the next episode.
That's all the awesome we have for you today. Thank you for taking time out of your day to join us. Please don't keep this episode a secret. The best insights, the biggest ideas, and the most important conversations, they're meant to be shared. So please, pass this episode along, leave a review, and hit subscribe so you never miss a chance to be part of the conversations shaping the future of education. Join the conversation and share your questions and episode ideas with us at jhanson@hawkmedia.com. We'll see you next time on the Education Insider.